On Thursday, the University of South Carolina introduced their 31st head baseball coach in program history, Paul Mainieri. And Jack, I think it went as well as anyone could have hoped for an introductory press conference.
It was about as good as it could have been. I mean, he had a lot of longer answers and only took so many questions, but everything he said was really good. And I think, Mike, you wrote a story earlier today on winning the press conference. And I think, this is just the beginning of everything, and you can judge a coach by wins and losses. But the fact that he said all the right things today just gave me, and I think a lot of the fans, the confidence that this is the right guy for the job, and Ray Tanner made a Grand Slam hire.
Well, it's one of those things. I've never been a fan of when people say, okay, winning the press conference. I think it's one of the dumbest things that people say in sports. However, when you think about college athletics, the new era that we're in, winning the press conference, it doesn't sound as dumb of a thing to say, simply because when you have a guy go up there today and say some of the things he did, and he's speaking directly into that camera, talking to that fan base, talking to the players, it can help from an NIL standpoint. And I certainly believe the fact that he's going to be 67 in the next couple months. He hasn't had to really deal with the transfer portal because he hasn't coached since 2021. And on top of that, NIL, it wasn't a thing until the summer of 2021. I think he made some people who maybe weren't believers in this hire feel a little bit better after today.
Yeah, and the big thing that I think at least me and I think most people already knew coming into today was that, hey, he's been out of the game since 2021. Transfer portal, NIL has become such a big thing, and he's obviously not equipped fully with that sort of stuff. He can learn it, and he said he definitely will have to and will try his best. But at the same time, he's got younger coaches on staff like MonteLee, Terry Rooney, John Hendry from Virginia that's going to be joining the staff and as assistant pitching coach. They all know how to handle player development and recruiting and the portal and all that sort of stuff. So my point is, while Mainieri and Ray Tanner are going to have the final decisions in a lot of things, the day-to-day operations of it, Mainieri won't have to be as involved, and he can focus on the coaching, which I think is why he took this job. If he had to focus on all those other things, I don't think it would have been a serious consideration for him to be hired for this.
Well, let's hear what Mainieri had to say when asked about that very question.
I'm going to depend on these guys, okay? I don't know exactly how this all works, but I'm learning a lot. I've learned a lot in the last 3 days with these guys. I think between the two of them, I've probably had 30 conversations and another 40 text messages while I've been in Baton Rouge and they've been here. So we're going to get this thing figured out. We're going to have it, have a really good plan going forward, and I'll become more and more involved as time goes on.
Now, Jack, as Ray Tanner alluded to, you're bringing in a guy who is the active winningest coach in college baseball right now. He's used to criticism. He was coaching at LSU. One thing in particular that really stood out, though, is just his understanding of the expectations here. And you would expect that when you come from a school like LSU.
Yeah, definitely. LSU is one of the gold standards, quite literally, for college baseball. Winning the national championship last year just showed that they are still one of the best. And Mainieri definitely, exemplified that over his time in Baton Rouge, going to 5 College World Series and obviously winning in 2009. And the standard for him does not change, right? Because, he's done it. He's been to the College World Series at LSU. He's been at Notre Dame to the College World Series. Winning is the only thing that matters in sports, and at least in my opinion. Obviously, what you do with player development also matters, and how you turn players into grown men is another thing. But when it comes to this job, Mainieri said it himself. He wouldn't have taken this job had it not been about winning. That is all he's here to do. He's here to win, and he's also here to develop players.
And he expects to win, too.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't beat around the bush. He says, I expect to win.
And the big thing that kind of stood out to me is that he said, I think this is how he said it, he doesn't have a 3-year plan. He has a 1-year plan to win. And look, a lot of people are skeptical of the fact that, he's 66 years old, he's going to be 67 next year, and how is he going to do coaching for the first time since 2021? He knows what it takes to win. And so I think you trust the guy if you're not trusting the guy that is the active wins leader in NCAA history for baseball right now, I don't know what to tell you.
One of the things that really stood out to me when he was talking about just the part of criticism, it comes with the game. He understands, but there was one quote in particular that I think really is going to get this fan base very excited. Take a listen.
There's only one thing worse than criticism, and that's apathy. There's not going to be apathy among Carolina fans. There wasn't apathy among LSU fans. The criticism is not to be taken personal. they want to win. And I don't blame them. They own season tickets. They support the baseball program. There's no Major League Baseball here. This is Major League Baseball for our fans and the people that are watching the games. But let me tell you this, they aren't going to want to win any more than I want to win.
Now, if the Mainieri hire was the big part, and obviously it is, I think the second biggest part of this all is that MonteLee is staying on to be the assistant head coach. Now, he's got a title change a little bit. The recruiting title is switching over to one of the new coaches, which we'll get into in a little bit, one of the other assistant coaches that they're bringing in. But it is clear, number one, that MonteLee, the assistant coaches, it's going to play a big role, especially when you have a guy that he was honest. He's like, look, I haven't been around the last couple of years. I'm starting to learn more about the transfer portal and NIL. These guys I'm going to depend on a lot.
Yeah, and again, this whole process with Mainieri coming to South Carolina, look, he didn't know the MonteLees of the world. I think he had some familiarity with John Hendry from Virginia, but Monty was a name that he didn't really know because obviously Monty's been in the state of South Carolina for his entire career. So with him being the interim coach before this whole process, in the in-between of Mark Kingston getting fired and Mainieri taking over, he said that Monty's done a fantastic job with handling the day-to-day operations of things. And I think in terms of recruiting, while Monty does lose the recruiting coordinator title per se, it's still going to be an all-hands-on-deck effort. Again, baseball is a team sport, and that's not just on the field. It also goes in the day-to-day operations of how you put together a roster and how you build a team from the ground up. And with Monty's ability to recruit in-state, it is a valuable asset that I think is very hard to find anywhere else.
I'll tell you what, let's go back to last week. Mark Kingston's fired, and what happens immediately? You see so many of the recruits for the class of 2025, and you see some of the current players as well take to social media, and they voice their support for MonteLee. Having a chance to catch up with Monty today, he's always been, look, it's not about me, it's about the kids. I asked him, I said, you got into this business because of that. You had that type of support. How important was that to you, and what does it feel like, especially knowing that you're going to be staying around in South Carolina?
That's winning for me. If you want me to be honest, like the wins and the losses are going to come and go. You're going to have great years, you're going to have disappointing years, but ultimately for me as a coach, I'm winning if the players have a great experience. If I believe that if I can provide them with the mentorship and the guidance to help them be successful and have a great experience at whatever school I've been at, then I've won at this game of coaching. And because the relationships with the players are the only thing that's going to matter when I'm 70 years old and I'm not coaching anymore. Was I a good person to them? Did I do my very best to make them successful and make sure that they had a great experience? Did I teach them something that they could take with them past baseball, past college baseball, into pro ball, into the workforce, as a husband, those types of things. All the same things that Coach Mainieri said. At the end of the day, I sleep pretty good at night when I'm doing a good job in the relationship department with the players.
Now this fan base, they know Lee pretty well, but this new coach is coming in, Rooney. What can you tell us about him, Jack?
Yeah, so Terry Rooney was on Mainieri's staff at Notre Dame when a few years after they went to the College World Series, and then when Mainieri went to LSU in 2007, Rooney followed, and he was the pitching coach, and I also believe the recruiting coordinator when LSU won the national championship in 2009. In fact, the Tigers had the #1 recruiting class in the country that led to that national championship team. And then, they went their separate ways after when Rooney went to UCF, but Rooney went back to LSU after Mainieri had retired from baseball and was the recruiting coordinator. So they have a long history. And I actually got to speak to Rooney a few days ago, exclusive interview on GamecockCentral.com on our YouTube page if you haven't checked it out already before having this whole press conference here. But he is, invested, right? And he wants to win. And he had a great quote. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'll paraphrase. He says, he wakes up and eats, sleeps, and drinks baseball. And he wakes up wanting to win a national championship every single day. And he said he's going to do everything he possibly can to help this program win. And the big thing that I've gotten out of listening to Rooney and Mainieri speak, and I feel like it was probably this way at LSU, they keep saying it's not about us, it's about them. And the them is the players. And they're so honed in on player development and making sure these kids not only are great baseball players, but like we said before, great men on and off the field. And I think I just love the attitude that they have towards the game and the respect they have for the players. And I think that's why. I mean, you saw the guys sitting in these seats right next to us here. Tons of players here today. And I think that goes a long way with not just supporting MonteLee, but having belief that this coaching staff can go out there and do it.
If you want to check out that story, sign up today to Gamecock Central, just $1 for your first month. Jack, before we wrap up, don't want to go too long on this, but you did ask a great question because it's been something that Gamecock fans, they've had experience the last couple of years. Analytics. Analytics are taking over sports. I joke all the time, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, the nerds are taking over sports, and I hate it. Having said that, you asked him how much he leans into analytics, how much you can expect him to use analytics, and I thought he gave you a pretty good answer.
The short answer he gave was yes. I asked him basically, how do you, okay, a lot of people have had criticisms over the years of, and me too, with Mark Kingston and the way he's been a game manager, right? There have been times where he's trusted the numbers over gut feel. And I feel like as a coach, you have to be able to trust your gut with what you're doing. And look, Mainieri did say that he's going to, look at the numbers and take advantage of the resources that he has at South Carolina with the hitting labs and pitching labs and all these different crazy inventions out there that help create the best pitchers and players possible. But at the same time, he said himself, he has two white eyeballs that are going to take a look at the game, and when it all comes down to it, he's going to trust his gut.
Yep.
And I feel like that is a big reassurance thing that I think a lot of fans were skeptical about, with the fact that Kingston, like we said, really looked at the numbers more than the gut feel. And the fact that Mainieri is going to go out there and go with what he feels over the numbers most of the time, obviously he'll balance both. It's a really good sign of things to come.
One thing that he mentioned when giving you that answer, and I think you can branch this out to just the way he thinks in general, his philosophy. A lot of these players coming up, they're used to the analytics. They're used to using all this new equipment out there when it comes to tracking velocity, spin rate, all that other stuff. He's like, I'm not going to be a dinosaur. I can't just go my old ways and do everything this way. And so I bring that up because, yes, it's only been 3 years. It's only been 3 years since he last coached. To some, they think that's, 30 years for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Being able to have him say that, again, it's just talk right now. It's just the press conference. But I think it also shows you that he's not going to be one of those coaches that comes in here thinking, okay, this is how I've always done it. This is how we're going to do it here. He sounds like a type of coach that's going to come in here. He obviously has a plan. He understands what success looks like. I mean, it's not even the national title in 2009. He's won multiple SEC tournaments. He's won multiple SEC regular season crowns. He seems like the type of coach that's going to come in here. If things don't work out for one reason or another, he's not going to say, all right, we have to keep doing it this way. He's going to make changes.
And here's the thing. It's not like he necessarily has to evolve with the times, but if he doesn't, he just won't win. That's kind of the way I look at it, at least. You have to evolve in order to win in baseball. And look, I'm not the biggest fan of analytics. I trust my judgment more than anything else, because at this point, if Paul's been coaching almost 40 years, if he doesn't trust what he's seen and his feel for the game over something a computer tells him, I don't know what we're doing. But I think the fact that he is going to lean into it a little bit while also not letting it overtake the way he's coached the game for the last 40 years, I think is a really good thing. And again, like we've been saying this whole time, a lot of good things today. And I think the analytics, the way he responded to that question, I think was one of the most important things talked about today.
One last thing I want to address today before we wrap things up. I know it might sound silly to some, but there were some people, I think, that genuinely were curious as to whether or not Ray Tanner would have any interest of getting back into the dugout. Was that something that he thought about? If you were one of those people, I got the answer for you. This is what Ray Tanner had to say.
I was flattered by a few people and a few conversations about it's okay. You could go back and do it again. And I never thought that was the right thing for me. It wasn't like I don't love the game. I do love the game. I watch baseball. I watch softball. I mean, I'm into, our sports, and I enjoy being the athletics director. You're not a great AD unless your teams win a lot. I get that, so I understand that. But I felt that, I needed to be where I'm at today, and but a couple people did flatter me.
So, Jack, that answer, it doesn't surprise me. I think it's one of those things. You think of great movies, right? You know, Rush Hour was a good movie. Rush Hour 2, hey, you know, like you don't need to go to the second one. The sequel's not always as good as the first time. That's not to say Tanner couldn't have done a good job if he gets back into the dugout, but it looks like that's done. It's in the past now.
I think it was going to be a long shot for Ray to come back into the coaching fold. You know, we talk about Mainieri being out of the game for 3 years. Ray's been out of the game.
Because they look at the age, but like you said, there's a lot more that's changed.
Yeah. And Ray is the same age as Paul. I think that's one thing we forget is that they're both 66 years old. But the thing with Ray is he hasn't been coaching since 2012. So if you think the game has changed in the last 3 years, look at the last 12. I mean, baseball is completely different now versus what it was in 2012. And you add in the fact that there's the portal, NIL, Analytics.
I'm not saying they didn't exist back then, but I mean, again, the nerds are taking over.
Yes, but it wasn't analytics didn't become as prevalent until, I would say, the mid-2010s. And
how big of an analytic guy you think Ray would be these days?
I don't think as much as Paul. Look, I don't think he'd be willing to give as much of a chance, but I think the point is it would have been a total long shot. And just beyond all that, does he really want to deal with the stress of that?
And everything's changing now. Again, not saying he couldn't do it, but you got the transfer portal, you got NIL. There's just so much more. Yes. And then the other part of it too is if God forbid things don't go well to start, they're going to be like, why did he come out of retirement? So again, I think a lot of us looked at it and said, all right, this isn't going to happen. But if you were curious out there, we asked that question to Ray Tanner today. Be sure to follow Gamecock Central all summer. Baseball, yes, obviously things are picking up. We'll see who's going to be staying with the Gamecocks over the next couple weeks, hopefully. I know we got players that are making their decision, like Messina. I mean, what is Moose going to do? Is he going to go to the draft? There's a lot going on, and we'll have it all on Gamecock Central.
And the big thing was that I noticed was that a lot of the players that have been in Columbia the last few weeks were here today at the press conference. And one of them in particular, I brought this up on the Insiders Forum before this whole thing began. Moose was in the building today. Cole Messina was here, and there's a great interview that Chris Clark did, our colleague at Gamecock Central. He did on the Garnet Trust Hour. I think it came out today.
Yeah, you'll be able to listen to that on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network.
So that was a discussion that Chris brought up with Moose was, you know, the whole MLB draft thing. But the fact that he was here today just shows that not just the fact that he's coming back next year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's crazy to pass up on going to the MLB draft. But it shows the level of respect and support that he has and the love he has for this university and all it's done for him in his 3 years in South Carolina. But other players that we know are coming back next year. Ethan Petrie's already confirmed to our colleagues at Gamecock Central that he'll be back next year. And then another guy.
There's speculation about him a week ago.
Exactly. And then I was able to confirm that Blake Jackson will be back next year. And there's a few others, Roman Kimball, Kennedy Jones. So I think they've got a good team in place. They're going to add, and we'll see what happens.
And guess what? Follow it all on Gamecock Central. Again, if you're not a subscriber, sign up today. Just $1 for your first month. You can't beat it. It's not just baseball coverage. You got basketball coverage in there as well. Football, things are picking up. Recruiting season. Bunch of welcome homes over the last week. Wes and Chris, myself, we're staying locked in on that. And you also have basketball in there as well. There is no such thing as an off season at Gamecock Central. He's Jack Veltri. I'm Mike Yuba. Again, appreciate you guys tuning in today, and be sure to follow the latest for all your Gamecock news on GamecockCentral.com.